What's up, everybody? How could you tell if you're in a video game? I know that seems like a silly question. Maybe it is, but I mean, would it even matter to know? What I think is a more interesting and useful question is, if you were in a video game, how could you know that your game reality was intentionally made? I mean, after all, I think that information would be extremely useful to somebody that had that knowledge. As far as I can tell, similar logic will apply to any video game. And this is a lot easier to figure out than you might expect. So just stick with me. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to focus on just one game called Minecraft. And don't worry, you don't need to have ever played Minecraft to understand what I'm about to go over. Now, to be clear, this video has nothing to do with figuring out if your game world is real or fake or if it's a simulation. I'm only going to cover how to tell if your game world was intentionally made. Now, what does intentionally made mean? What does that word intentional mean? Intentional means that something was done on purpose, versus random means that something was done without a conscious decision. Now, let's answer an easy question before we get started. Is the game Minecraft intentionally made? Of course it is, right? I mean, here's a list of lots of people who worked on the game just to prove it. Now, since we know that Minecraft is intentionally made, we have insider information, so to speak. So we can reword the question so that it looks something like this. Knowing that Minecraft is intentionally made, what kind of evidence should we expect in the game that would indicate intentionality? There's several ways to figure this out, but I'm only going to share one with you now. And again, it's a lot easier to figure out than you might expect. So just stick with me. Let me give you a couple of quick analogies to better illustrate this idea. Now, picture you walk into a room and you see a quarter on a table, and that quarter is heads up. And you have to determine why that quarter is heads up. You have two choices. Choice A says that the quarter was just randomly flipped and just simply happened to land heads up. Choice B says that somebody placed the quarter heads up on purpose. Now, if all you have to go by is just the result, which is the quarter is heads up, could you determine which of those two things happened? As far as I can tell, there's no way to figure it out in this scenario because the quarter landing heads up is a 50% shot. You got 1 in every 2 chances. Now, let me stress this. You don't need to know anything about probabilities to understand that. You know that the quarter could have just randomly landed heads up. It's as simple as that. But what if you saw 10 quarters all heads up? It's a little harder to picture, right? 10 quarters all randomly landing heads up. I mean, of course it's possible. The chances of that are 1 in over 1,000 chances, but it's still possible, right? But what if the quarters were all heads up, but they were also in a neat little line? And what if they were not only in a neat little line, but they were also oriented in the same way? How does that change how you look at it? I'm guessing most of you would just look at that and just automatically assume someone did that on purpose because you just intuitively know the chances of the quarters randomly landing like that would just be too small for that to happen just by chance. So let's look at Lego blocks now. Can you tell if I put these 2 Lego blocks together on purpose, or do they just randomly happen to come together? As these pictures go on, do the chances of these structures just randomly coming together by chance get more likely or less likely? It's easy to tell, right? But why is that? Let's see what we can learn from these examples. Now take a look at this. How do you know that I intentionally build this? I mean, you weren't there when I made it. You have no video evidence of me making it, and all you have to go by is just the result. I mean, it could be that these Legos just happened to fall into place like this. They just randomly came together to build the structure. But no, you know that, I mean, maybe that's possible, but the chances of that are just way too small. So when you look at something like this, you just automatically know that it was done on purpose, aka it was intentional. In other words, you know the cause by observing the effect. Now notice that this Lego creation has a pattern that's discernible. There's form and structure that we can detect that indicates intentionality. Versus Legos just being dumped randomly on the table, there's not really a pattern there that you can find as easily. Also notice that as the item units go up, for example like the coin or the Legos, as more units get involved and those units are all ordered and oriented in the same way, your mind just knows that the chances of those things all coming together are just too small. So consequently, when you have more item units involved, it gets easier and easier to tell if something was intentional or not. So what we've learned from these examples is the more complex a structure is, the more consistent a pattern is, the more units that are involved, the more likely it is that that thing is intentional versus it just happening randomly. Now let's take a look in the Minecraft world to see if there's any patterns we can detect if we were in that world. Do you see any indications of intentionality here? Are there any patterns that we can see? Are there any units here, and are those units also oriented in the same way? Looky here! Looks like a perfect cube. But wait, it looks like all the units here are perfect cubes. It looks like these cubes are also oriented in the same way. I mean, look, you got that flat face facing up. I mean, it could be an edge or a corner facing up, but all these cubes all have that flat face facing up. And if you look, none of them are clipping into each other. I mean, they're all just neatly arranged like with the coin or the Legos. So earlier I said if you were to flip a quarter 10 times and it landed on heads every single time, 10 times in a row, that would be about 1 in 1,024 chances. But what if you were to roll a die? What are the chances that you would land on a 6 face up? So if you're just to roll a die one time, it would be 1 in 6 chances. But what about 10 dice all landing 6 face up? The chances of that happening are 1 in over 60 million. And again, you don't need to know anything about probabilities here to just automatically, intuitively understand if you see 10 dice all with the 6 face up, you just kind of know that the chances of that are just too small. You don't have to know anything about probabilities. But I bring that up because, I mean, look at all these cubes here, right? That means way more than 10, and they're all oriented in the same way. None of them are clipping into each other. They're just neatly arranged here. So the odds of all of this happening just randomly by chance would be astronomically low. So that's it. I mean, that's all we really need to see to understand that if we were in the Minecraft world, it would be way more reasonable to believe that it was intentionally made. Now somebody could say, well, Paul, I mean, the Minecraft world terrain is random, so if we're in the game, that might make us believe that everything in our world was randomly generated. But is the terrain really completely random? I mean, look, it's all built out of these perfect cubes. Everywhere you look, the terrain is made out of the perfect cubes. And forget about that for a moment. Think about this. Answer me this question. If you know about Minecraft at least, do you ever see clouds on the floor? Do you ever see blocks just tumbling through space? Do you ever see those cubes just going up past the sky? No, you never see that, and that's because the Minecraft world terrain is somewhat random, but the developers built it that way. The terrain is following a fixed algorithm that you can expect. I mean, when you load up a game of Minecraft, you never expect for the blocks just to be in some crazy order. You expect kind of the same things, hills, valleys, water, that kind of thing. And the developers spent a lot of time working on that algorithm. So the terrain is random to a certain degree, but it's definitely intentional. Okay, so somebody could say, well, Paul, if we were in the Minecraft game, we would have no context of intentionality or random, so there'd just be no way to know. Okay. Let's look around at the Minecraft world terrain, and you tell me, can you spot anything that isn't part of the normal Minecraft world terrain? Oh, this? You think this is intentionally made? I mean, what makes you say that? Maybe this is just part of the terrain. Maybe the terrain just happened to generate like this. No, you know better. So, as you can see, even in the game, we can tell the difference between intentionality and randomness. So since the same patterns repeat, we can use similar logic to deduce that our Minecraft world was made on purpose. Now there could be somebody in the Minecraft world that objects to the things that I'm saying. So I'm saying, look, our world is intentionally made, but they say, no, it's not, Paul. There's a force that could have oriented these cubes. Perhaps there's a force, like the laws of nature, that caused these units, these blocks, to look the way that they do. But if there were in-game laws, would that take away from the evidence that we see of intentionality? I mean, imagine that you're one of the developers of Minecraft and you spent months, if not years, painstakingly crafting the physics in the game, making in-game laws with you and a team of people to just get it down just right so that the world works the way that you need it to, so that it's coherent and that it functions correctly. And then later you learn that there's in-game conscious characters that are running experiments to discover those laws that you and your team created. Wouldn't it be silly that they would conclude that their whole reality was all randomly generated because there's in-game laws? Here's a good question to ask yourself if you're trying to figure it out. Let's say if you're in a game. Ask yourself, what are the odds that these laws are all working together in perfect unison so that my reality functions and is coherent? Just imagine if there was no gravity. Or what if gravity was just way too strong? I mean, you wouldn't even be able to get up. I couldn't even jump over this block here. It's like studying a painting. The more complex the art, the more complex the procedure in which the art was created, the more you can be certain that there was a painter. So if anything, pointing out laws that are in the game would only increase the probability of intentionality. It would only increase the idea that your world was made on purpose versus if it was just an environment alone without any laws. Another way to think about it is if you can conduct experiments, that's a clear way to know that your game world was intentionally made. Just think about it. What do experiments do? Ultimately, experiments attempt to discover some kind of pattern such as gravity or electricity. And if there isn't a pattern to detect, aka all things are random, you couldn't do experiments. So if you can do experiments, there needs to be consistent patterns to detect. And remember, consistent patterns side with intentionality. I mean, just in theory, how would you even conduct an experiment without the laws of logic or the laws of mathematics? So again, if anything, if you pointed out laws, in-game laws that were consistent, all that would do is just increase the chances of intentionality. Now somebody could come along and say, well, Paul, there's just no way to know for sure because, given enough time, anything is possible. I mean, just think if there was a monkey typing on a typewriter throughout infinity, eventually it's going to type Shakespeare type thing. Okay, but we know that Minecraft has not been on for an eternity. In my original question, when I originally stated it, I said that there was other self-aware characters in the game. And these characters have done experiments over and over and over again, so they have vast knowledge of the environment. So it's plausible to assume that through their research, they've discovered that their Minecraft world is not infinite. And even if they didn't have the scientific means to discover that, just strictly logically speaking, you can't have an infinite causal chain. So just with that alone, you could still know that your world isn't infinitely old. That's a hint at another way to figure out if your world is intentionally made, by the way. Message! So the other self-aware conscious characters in the game would most likely know that their world had a beginning. And even if other characters mistakenly concluded that their world was infinitely old, it wouldn't matter, because that still doesn't override all of the evidence of intentionality. All the fact that all these blocks are perfect cubes, the fact that physics operate in the same way consistently in game, the fact that there's a day-night cycle, etc. I mean, still though, if you look at the examples that I'm giving, in each case there was something that was created first before you get something random. So you got the coin, which was created. You have the Lego block, which was created. Minecraft is running on a computer or your gaming console. That was created. So even if you were to say that you could just randomly input code into a computer and eventually, given enough time, you would get the game Minecraft, that still overlooks the fact that there's a computer or a gaming console that exists, that was created, in which that you could even add code into. By the way, that's another hint at another way to discover that your world was intentionally made.
Message.
So I'm only scratching the surface here, guys. This is by no means an exhaustive look at the design of Minecraft. All I'm doing is just pointing out that if you were in Minecraft, it would be way more reasonable to conclude that your world was intentionally made. But Paul, knowing that my game world is intentionally made isn't going to affect my life. I'm just going to keep living my life the way that I want to. Even if there was a designer, that's not going to affect me. This is by far the most common response that I receive when I ask this question, which is why when I initially asked it, I offered the $100 to people who gave me the best response, because I'm just trying to get people to think. So this video is long enough. I'm going to cut it here, but I'm going to cover why it would matter. Why it would matter to know that your game world is intentionally created in the next video. So let me know if you guys have any thoughts, and that's it for the video, guys. God bless you all. Peace.
Message.